Hello everyone, welcome to this. This is the 6th in a series of webinars we're hosting as part of our annual user community symposium. Just a quick note to say that we are recording this webinar. And in this webinar, we're going to look at MethoGrid's product vision, our key development themes for 2022, and the initial results from our user feedback survey. Relating to these key development themes, the features, and during this we'll also take a deeper dive into some of those features and some early concept designs for those as well. Before we get into that, just a few bits of information, kind of help you interact with the webinar. So like I said, this is a series of webinars. We've got 8 in total, 2 happening tomorrow. On Monday, we had Oxford Brookes University show us how they're using MethoGrid to assure construction engineering projects there. My colleague Rachel and I did a review of the features released in 2021. And then a consulting company called Future Shift showed us how they use MethoGrid, the platform, to deliver what they call platform-led consulting. And that helps small and medium-sized businesses go through the B Corp certification. And MGI Learning, who have just recently implemented MethoGrid, provided some feedback on how that went, lessons learned, that kind of thing. Earlier today, Step 5 Group went through how they're building out MethoGrid to assure large-scale transformational projects. Here we are now in our workshop for the roadmap 2022. And tomorrow, EcoSulis, who are rewilding and ecological experts, will be talking about how large-scale construction engineering products can minimize their environmental impact. And then finishing off the symposium this year, we've got Don Morehouse and Mark North, one of our senior developers, talking about the future of project assurance and how machine learning and AI can help with that. A few of those have already happened. If you want to watch them, they're all available as video replays on methodgrid.com/webinars. So as I go through the webinar, I'm going to kind of pause at each section. I split it up into our development themes, and I'll pause at each section to see if anyone's got any questions. Now, to put the questions in, if I just post this link to an app called Slido in the chat. So I've just put that in the chat in Teams. If you follow that link, you'll see a screen there where you can post questions. There's also a tab for ideas. So, as I'm talking and going through this, if you suddenly think, oh, wouldn't it be great if that feature did this, or this would be a better thing to do, just type an idea in there and post it, and we're going to collate those all and go through those ourselves. But like I say, if you've got any questions as I'm going through, please do post them in the questions there, and I'll kind of pause gradually throughout the webinar so we can address the questions at the point that they're most relevant. Okay, let's crack on. I thought it might be nice first of all to introduce you to the product team here at MethoGrid. The core product team is myself, Jody as head of product, and I have Tom, who's our creative and UX director. So he designs everything you see in MethoGrid, the product, everything you're interacting with on the front end there. And then Edward is our product manager and also our test engineer, making sure everything's working correctly. We also have a core product implementation team, and the customer focus is key to MethoGrid, and we have an in-house consulting team that help people who are using MethoGrid really embed it into their organizations and build out their methodologies. So part of that team is Don Morehouse, our CEO. There's Tim Wellens, who's heading up our professional services team. Tim brings a real treasure trove of experience in large-scale construction engineering project management. Alice Holden is a senior consultant. Alice is a very experienced consultant who specializes in project delivery and change management. And then for our sort of day-to-day support and any coaching you need on MethoGrid, Rachel Erie heads up our customer success team. If you ever need support or just a coaching session from Rachel or the team, please just email help@methodgrid.com. They're always available to help. So I thought we'd start by just explaining our vision. So every good product has a vision, and our vision is connected assurance. And when we're talking about that, when we're building the product, we like to think of it as this circle, this loop, starting with the knowledge that you capture in our MethoGrids. So processes, best practice, methodologies for whatever it is you're delivering. Then there's a delivery phase, which is much more kind of the project management side of it, standard things like tasks, due dates, assignment to team. And then crucially, and within connected insurance, we have an insurance element. So key tools to let you track what's being done, capture key documentation, create assurance records, and really track project activity. And then we take that at the end into an improvement, which is sort of lessons learned and continuous improvement, so that this goes round in a circle, continuously feeding back into those knowledge grids. So when it comes to the themes that we looked at for Method Grid in 2022, it was these core 4 themes. But we also look at sort of general enhancements. How can we make the app better and easier for our users? We also look at content that we can create. So you'll know that we have a sort of a store and example grid section in Method Grid, where you can just clone those grids into your account and have a look at best practice for a setup of one of those grids. We always look to expand those throughout the year. We're also considering key integrations to other applications commonly used, like Office 365, Google Workspace, Slack, those kind of things. So the way I'm going to go through some of these features, I'm going to start, we've recently sent out our 2021 user survey. So we send this out every year to our users to sort of gauge what they think of Method Grid now. And we break down those core development themes that I've just shown you. And we've always put in like a few features that we're thinking about and really gauge the reaction in the user community to that. So as part of that, I'll just go through some of the results we'll have there. And we'll first of all, we'll sort of get a steer for how our users are really feeling about Method Grid at the moment. So we asked quite an open-ended question, what do you most like about Method Grid? And a few things really came through on this. Number one really is ease of use. And we're quite proud of this. We've deliberately tried to keep Method Grid as simple as possible. It's not complicated. You don't need a degree in software development just to build it out. Things like SharePoint are just so complicated. And the simple grid structure keep things really succinct. And people also seem to like the way that you can simply manage tasks in there and how that flows through into our dashboards. Of course, there's always room for improvement. We always ask this every year. Something that came through quite a lot, we'd like to see some, and what we want to do as well is make some improvements to our commenting system. It's at the core of communication and connected assurance. We're also looking at, a lot of feedback comes in on about automating content updates. So changes in elements that you want to roll out further into your account, into other grids. And actually we'll come back to that a little bit in one of our concept features of the future. Another thing that comes up a lot is element versioning and the ability to undo. So you spend a lot of time putting the content into an element, make a change, and then you want to go back to a previous version, something that we're all kind of used to in Word documents. So one of the first questions we asked them, we wanted to gauge based on those, the product vision that we had, the knowledge, delivery, assurance, improvement, is what do people really use Method Grid for? Now, it came through knowledge by far was the number one here in the result, with continuous improvements and lesson learned next, and then delivery and assurance. So, our key takeaway from that is being able to put the knowledge into Method Grid is absolutely key for our users. Another score we use in the survey is a thing called NPS, which is a Net Promoter Score, which is very common in the SaaS industry to sort of gauge customer loyalty. I'm very pleased to say that it's increased in the last 12 months. So thanks for everyone who voted there. So this measures how likely you are to recommend Method Grid to another professional acquaintance. And anything in the kind of 60 up to 100 is in the great and excellent mark. So we're very happy with that. Thank you. We use this is a simple gauge to really ascertain if the product market fit of Method Grid. So we pose the question, if Method Grid was taken away from you tomorrow, how disappointed would you be? Would you be very disappointed, somewhat disappointed, or not disappointed? Now, again, very pleased to see that we've moved up again this year. No one would be disappointed, and actually we've ticked over into above 50% would be very disappointed now. I think this is largely thanks to the great feedback we get from you as users, and the focus we put on as a product team to really work with our key accounts and the users through our community to, every time we're looking to put a feature in, it's so important that you guys feedback on it. So I showed you we had some key development themes there earlier on, and here we're looking at the results of so in each of these questions, we ask our users to put a kind of priority on each of these themes. So which is the most important to you? And we gauge that from it's very high, medium, very low, or don't know, possibly not interested. There's a real clear preference in the areas of delivery, assurance and improvement here. You can see so that the orange is low priority going up to the dark blue. Interestingly, the pre-built example grids not being a major focus at this time. So I'm just going to pause there in case anyone's got a question about anything about the vision or anything like that. Like I said, if you do, just post it in Slido there. I put the link in the chat, and if not, I'll move on. So I want to go now through each of the project vision and the feature concept areas that we've put out in the survey. So I'll show everyone the results of the survey. So those features that were highly valued by users in the survey, and then following on from that, we've put together some kind of concepts for how those features would work. And again, if you as I'm going through these, if you've got any questions about them, just put them in Slido. So knowledge features, there was a range of these. It's all scaled from low to high, and at the moment the highest in these seems to be the ability to preview a document, some kind of element versioning control, and filtered grid views. So what does that mean? Well, we've kind of knocked up a few concepts around these. So the first was the ability to preview documents. So clearly in Elements you can upload and attach a document and we store it for you in MethodGrid, or you can link out to SharePoint, OneDrive, Google Drive, Dropbox. They all largely look the same. So what people ask us a lot for is the ability to, instead of clicking that link to that document and opening it straight away, it's just the ability to preview it kind of without leaving MethodGrid, just so you can read the content. And then, if you then want to go on to use that as a template, clearly you go off and open it within your own document management system or open up the uploaded file. Another major one for and this is very much around Elements, is the ability to have version control within Elements. So much like you'd have a version control in a Word document and you can roll back to previous versions, we're looking to introduce that into Elements themselves. And crucially, this would also give you the ability to kind of roll back to previous versions. I see this as quite a key feature actually for MethodGrid going forward, and it will relate back to a future concept that we'll go through in this webinar, which is about a kind of parent-child relationship between content, and the ability to automatically send content updates sort of up and down that chain. But a crucial part of that is it will be our ability to track when you've made changes to elements and grids. Largely crucially in Elements, I would say that's where most of our content lives. So that's what that will enable you to do. So as well as having a version control, version 1, 2, 3, 4 of an element, you'll also be able to roll back, if you make a mistake and you want to go back and undo that. So this is an interesting one. A lot of our clients have very large grids, and sometimes you only want to see possibly the grids that are assigned to you. Not the elements that are assigned to you, or the elements have labeled a certain color. What this feature concept is looking at is bringing in the ability to filter a grid. So if I went into a grid, I could say, OK, I only want to see the elements that are labeled orange and green, or I only want to see the elements which have a due date of this week, or the elements that are overdue, or the elements that are assigned to me. And in this way, you'll be able to sort of really narrow down the focus of a grid to just those elements that are relevant to you or relevant to what you want to get done in that grid. So I'll just pause there for a minute to see if there's any questions. Just checking in here. So I can see that there's one. OK, and it's relating back to the version control and whether we're considering version control on the grids as well. So yes, we are. I mean, I think initially it will very much be on elements, as that's where most of your content updates take place. But I think we'll definitely look to expand that into the versioning of grids as well, so that master and project delivery grids can be rolled back to previous versions. So that the short answer is yes. Whether it be in 2022, I think element versioning certainly will, potentially grid versioning as well. Okay, I'll move on. So this area now is the delivery based features. So this is things, the real core kind of project management type features, task management, that kind of thing. You can see there, these were how our users have prioritized this. There's some clear front runners in there. Hiding and archiving elements within the grids, which interesting, it's slightly different from just filtering the view, and I'll show you that when we get into the concept design for that. One that comes through actually time and again is different views of our grids, including kind of calendar or Gantt views as well. And the one at the bottom there is, which has got a lot of very high priority, is advanced element completion rules. So let's have a quick look at some of the ideas around that. So the calendar view is something we've thought about for a long time here, actually, at MethodGrid, and the more and more delivery and project management features we put in, the more and more sense it makes, and the more our users ask for this. So I mean, in its simplest form, if an element in a grid has got a due date, we can place it into a calendar, and we're going to give you the ability to sort of toggle that grid between a calendar view and the standard grid methodological view. I think a natural progression for that would be, I mean, there's a simple, your traditional calendar, 30 days on a calendar view. There's also a sort of schedule view to these kind of things, and you can see that progressing, with the inclusion of start and end dates into a traditional project kind of Gantt view as well. And of course, we can bring these views out of the grid and show a task calendar view for your tasks, and also potentially a grid calendar view. If you've got 60, 70, 80 projects going on with the grids open, could be useful to see that in a calendar view as well. So I think this will start at the grid level and expand onwards from there. Now, advanced element completion rules are something that come up quite a lot, and we see this kind of working like as a wizard that you would sort of set up. So at the moment we have labeling rules for elements, so you can change the color of an element based on certain criteria. So if it's complete, if it's overdue, or if a task within it is overdue. This would kind of expand that functionality and make it far more advanced. So you could set up rules, for instance, like you can't complete element X until element Y is completed. So you can't start the tasks in there, or perhaps element Z cannot be started until elements X and Y are complete. And you can see how you could build that up into a methodology within the grid that kind of ties elements down to the completion of other elements or the completion of other tasks. So this is the one I mentioned at the beginning, the ability to hide and archive elements on a grid. But when a lot of people, so a lot of our kind of enterprise level and small and medium even will have grids with something like 400 elements with them, and they're very large. And when they clone them into a project instance, quite often, you don't need all 400 of those elements for that project. You clone the grid and then you tweak the content of it to the specifics of that project or that client. But sometimes people want to take an element out, but they don't want to delete it because they might want to bring it back. It might become relevant. It might come in scope in that project in the future. So what this feature would give you the ability to do is to just hide an element on a grid. And importantly, what that would do is it would hide it there, and you could bring it back with a filter if you then wanted to use it. But importantly, it would also discount that element from any of the reporting in the grid. So if it had tasks within it or completion date, it won't be in your progress reports and things like that. It's essentially hidden in terms of the delivery of that grid. And by the same token, we're kind of differentiating here between a hiding and archiving. So a hidden one just isn't included, it isn't there. Archiving would be something's completed and you just want to not show it on the grid anymore. So you take it off. It's still going to be in the progress reports, but you take it off and you don't want to see it within the grid view anymore. This tends to come up mostly with people using grids for the Kanban or Scrum type grids, where you might end up with lots of elements as tasks and lots in your kind of your traditional done stage over here. You could then archive those rather than have it continuously fill up, especially in something that's ongoing for a long time. So I'll just pause there for a moment. I'm just going to check the question. So there is one. Okay, so it's is there a way, or do you have any plans to automate grid creation? So that's an interesting question. So we do, in so much as at the moment we've released version 1, 2, 3, and 4 of our method grid API. So the API allows a developer or technically minded person to build their own method grid integrations. And in a future version of that will be a trigger that you can hook into to create or clone an existing grid. So it won't be in terms of, you know, an interface for it, but it will be a possibility for you to put it into a workflow and say, you know, I've done this in SharePoint. Now we're going to trigger it off and create a grid somewhere. So I hope that answers that question. And I will move on. So our next section in the survey and our section in development themes is assurance and improvement. I've put these both together. There you go. You can see the features that we asked people about. I mean, there's a very couple of very clear winners in here. So this is, you know, project assurance, continuous improvement, feedback, lessons learned, all wrapped up in these kind of features. Couple stood out. So the parent-child relationship for grids and elements in terms of pulling and pushing new and improved content, which I think is really important for the improvement and the continuous improvement loop. Lessons learned, behavioral nudges, which I'll sort of elaborate on in a minute, and date stamped assurance records. So I'll just take a look at those three. So this is a very key one, and I see this probably coming out early in 2022, is the ability, when you change content in an element, say in your master copy of that grid, you often want to then send those changes down to the clone children of this grid. So you've got a parent up here and he's got lots of children, and you make a change up here and you want to send it down to the elements in those grids. This is what this feature is all about. So if you make a change up in your master draft, we'll give you an interface to say, and we see this probably as behavioral as well, say, oh, look, we noticed you've made quite a key change here. Do you want to push this down to the children of this master grid? And it raises an interesting question about whether we would automate that or we'd leave it to you as the user to decide. I think probably we land on the user to decide. We know we could give you return you a list of the grids which that element appears in, and then you can select which one to push the changes down into. And of course, that can equally lead on to something that's quite key in insurance and risk, is that, you know, if you've made a key change in an element, say to some kind of regulation document or regulation copy you've got in the element, you need to know that that's been seen now in the delivery, and this will give you the ability to say, okay, that's a vital bit of information. Now that irrespective needs to go down to every project that this has been cloned from this grid, and this will give you the ability to do that. So, you know, it'd be things like, you know, if you changed a template document in element 1, you could push that change down. And we also see it working in reverse. So if you or your colleagues are working down in one of the project grids and you make a change in an element, you add a task or you add a better template document, we'll look to detect that and make the suggestion, do you want to push this back up the chain to your master draft and suggest it as a change? So I think that's going to be a really key feature for us in 2022. Around a similar concept is the idea of behavioral nudges in terms of getting team members to actually feedback on lessons learned. So I mean, lessons learned and continuous improvement, they're terms that are bandied around a lot, but I'm not sure how many organizations can genuinely say they're 100% efficient in that area. So the concept around this is we're looking to possibly have machine learning detect changes that you make within your knowledge and in the content. And if someone makes what's deemed quite an important change, again, going back to the regulatory example, we can detect that And in the design, we prompt the user who's done it to say, okay, you've made a big change there. We think this could be important. Can you make a note as to what the lessons learned were in this area? And you can see how that would tie back in then to the parent-child relationship and the content. We can then push that back up. And we're almost starting to automate that loop in our product vision. So assurance is a key part of method grid. And one of the key ones that came up in this section of our survey was the ability to kind of create date-stamped assurance records. So one feature that we are actually in the process of building and releasing early, probably Q1 of 2022, are stage gates within the grids. So you'll be able to set on a grid a stage gate, which will say, okay, we're in stage 1. We're not going to progress to stage 2 until we're happy that stage 1 is completed from an assurance point of view. And once that gate is signed off, part of that process, we want to actually produce a report, a kind of frozen point in time assurance report of what happened at that stage at that time. And that would happen in the stage gate sign off. So you can imagine opening up with information of what's required to sign off this stage. And then within that, you can print or look at a report that's all the tasks that were completed, all the documents maybe that are updated as file evidence, anything that's required to sign off that stage. And then we lock it down, and there you have a date stamped assurance of what happened at that stage. And we'll build in a loop to say, well, okay, if you need to reopen that stage, we have to sign it off again, and we create a newly date stamped assurance record at that point as well. So I think that'll be a key feature for us in 2022, and it will form part of a feature we're already actually building. I will stop there for 1 second, just in case we have any questions, but it might be that we don't have on the assurance side. And I'll move on. So section general enhancement integrations. Well, general enhancements is just as kind of catch-all for us in terms of features that just generally improve the use of the app. Including in this section, we've also put in integrations. That's integrations with other pieces of software that your team uses. I mean, there are the key ones of the Microsoft suite and the Google suite, which tend to be the main ones. We have other things around Slack as well. So we have existing integrations, but this is more questions about what other integrations would you like to see. So there's two that really stood out here. One is a Teams app, somehow to have method grid embedded as part of Teams, part of Microsoft Teams. Another one, interesting one that came out, just a general enhancement, is the ability to see in method grid other members of your team that are on there at the same time, so who's online, and potentially to interact with those as well. So let's have a look at those two. So we are in the process of concept designing and building a Microsoft Teams app. This will be kind of based around the productivity hub that we actually have already in method grid. So here, this is our sort of top level concept design for this. So a Teams app very much takes on the look and feel of Teams, and we're just passing in data from method grid to Teams, so you can just view it, and you're kind of working with method grid, but very much in a Teams environment and a Teams look. In this concept, we've taken a common Teams interface, which is kind of a Kanban, like a bucket of task interface. But in here, we're looking to put in grids and elements and tasks. So this will be things that are assigned to you personally. So you go into Teams and you've got a dashboard of what's assigned to you personally in Teams and from method grid. And in there, you'll be able to interact with it and, of course, open up and go to method grid so you can view the knowledge that goes alongside that. If you've got any further ideas, please put them in the ideas section on Slido there. We're collecting those. So that's the idea around the Teams application. So the other one that came out head and shoulders above the others really was the who's online. So I mean, this is an early concept design for this. So as your colleagues come on, and if they're live and in method grid at that moment, we'll show who's there, and you can then look to interact with them, instant messaging, that kind of thing. If you've got any ideas around that, again, post those into Slido. So I have seen a couple of questions come in around this. So the first one is actually on says, is there a chat bot for Teams? So there isn't a chat bot per se for Teams. There is what we have. We have the equivalent essentially. We use a common feature in Teams. It's one of their. If you go into a Teams channel, there is a add-on you add. It's part of Teams called a webhook, and in there you configure that, and it gives you a URL for which MethoGrid can then send and post updates into Teams. So you can connect that URL. It's very simple to set up. If you want to know how to do it, you go to help.methogrid.com and just search for Microsoft Teams, and all the help around how to integrate MethoGrid in Teams is in there. But essentially, once you've configured that, if you add a new element or a new comment to a grid, it will post that notification back into Teams for you. So it's not a true chatbot, but notifications are coming into Teams, which might be where you're spending a lot of your working day. In terms of a chatbot, we are looking into it. So chatbots are more sort of a simpler way of installing that into a Teams channel and have some machine learning around them as well. But essentially, it would be notifications coming in from MethoGrid and vice versa. So I hope that answers that for now. I think maybe I'll leave the other question we've got in there till the end, and I'll move on. So we also asked, is there any other applications you'd like to see integrations for in the future? So Slack comes up a lot, and we already have a Slack integration. It works exactly the same way as the Teams one I just described. It's a webhook based one, and that again sends notifications from MethoGrid into the Slack channel of your choice. In terms of Google, what was Google G Suite and is now Google Workspace, a common request we've seen is the ability to import Google Calendar items into MethoGrid as tasks. So taking reminders you've got in your calendar and putting them into elements as tasks. So it's kind of a flip of what we've got now, actually. So we have an integration already with Google Calendar. If you have a task assigned to you in one of our elements, there's a little button there, and if it has a due date, the button will appear, and you can send that into your Google Calendar or indeed your Outlook calendar as well, and that will create that as a sort of a free all-day appointment to then trigger reminders and things in your calendar. So it's interesting that people have the idea of actually flipping that on its head and bringing things in from calendars into MethoGrid. So we're actively looking at that. For some of the ones, as I mentioned before, we're building out the API. So once the API is we have every feature in there, and it's like it's 80% there. You'll actually be able to build your own integrations whenever you want, and we'll be able to roll out these type of integrations much quicker. So we also asked people if they had any final thoughts in the survey, just a general provide a free text. Well, how do you feel? I think what came across loud and clear again, and actually I mentioned this, but this came across in the what do you like about MethoGrid as well, is not to use MethoGrid's unique ease of use, because no one wants to. The joy of MethoGrid is it doesn't have the complexity of a SharePoint or these kind of more website buildery applications that you get. There's one way of putting it in, and it's a methodology, it's a grid, and it's really easy to build. And what's great about MethoGrid is even a completely non-tech savvy user can build out really complex content and methodologies with minimal training. It's almost pick up and go, right? So another one that comes up a lot and actually came up in a webinar earlier this week that we hosted is the ability to put tables in the element content areas. So we've had this a lot, and that should be out, I would hope, in Q1 2022. We're looking as part of our text editor to introduce, you can build your own tables in there. But importantly, and what we're trying to build at the moment is the ability to copy a table from Excel and put it into MethoGrid. It would be like a view-only table, really. We're not talking about putting in all the functionality of Excel. You've got Excel for that. But if you want to show a table of data within MethoGrid, that functionality is coming really soon. So we're drawing to the end. I'm just going to come to our last slide where we've got the reminder of where to post any questions you've got in here in Slido. I do have one that's coming left over from a previous section, but I thought I'd leave it to the end. So the question is, do you have any plans to increase the search in MethoGrid to include searching for text within documents that are attached to elements? So that's interesting, and that's actually a question that's come up in a previous webinar this week. So it's obviously on our users' mind. So at the moment in MethoGrid, when you search, you can filter that search to look for grid titles, element titles, also the content within the elements that you physically put in there. In a soon to be released feature, we will also include in that search searches for documents that you've put into elements. So the links to documents and document management systems or documents you've uploaded, we'll start to search the file name of that or the display name that you've used for it in MepiGrid, so you can find them quickly, and then you can kind of filter the search to say I only want to search for documents, and it will just return documents with those names. But I think what we're asking here is, are we going to go a step further and actually look within that document, and the search would actually search the content in the document? So it's interesting. It comes up a lot. I mean, I guess what it comes back to is the MepiGrid bot would have to have access. So you give MepiGrid View access to these documents when they go up, and we go in and read those. So it's not a huge step for us to go beyond that and read that and analyze that content and make it available for you to search. So I think it's probably on the cards. But if you want to learn more about it and more about it, we're taking it actually beyond just searching, and what we really would like to do is take that corpus of documents and data and actually put it through our bot and machine learning and use that to make suggestions when you're actually creating elements and when you're actually working in projects. And if you want to know more about that, we've got a webinar tomorrow, same time tomorrow, 4 o'clock, with Don Morehouse, who's going to look at what that might mean for the future of project assurance. And you know, for the person who asked that question, that will be a crucial part of that. So I would urge you to go and sign up for that webinar, and you can do that at mepigrid.com/webinars. So I'll leave it open here in case anyone else has got a question. For now, though, that's a look through what we've got planned in terms of concepts out there, features we're thinking of building, and what's coming up in 2022. If you do ever want to look at what's coming up next in our roadmap, if you go to our website and down in the scroll to the bottom and in the footer under a product section, you'll see a link to product roadmap, and we post up there the kind of next 3 or 4 features that are actively in development and will be released. So just keep going and checking there, and you can see what's in the roadmap to be planned to come out there. So if there's no further questions, thanks very much for joining me, and I will sign off and say goodbye. Thanks for coming. Bye for now.